Imagine waking up to find black boils the size of apples covering your body. Your fever burns so hot you're delirious. Blood pours from your mouth and nose. Within days you're dead, and so is nearly everyone you've ever known. This wasn't a nightmare. This was reality for millions of people in the 14th century when the most devastating pandemic in human history swept across the known world. The Black Death didn't just kill people. It killed entire civilizations, toppled governments, and changed the course of human history forever. Today, we're diving deep into the real story behind the plague that wiped out nearly half of Europe's population and reshaped our world in ways we're still feeling today. Welcome to Nightmare Narratives, where true history bleeds into horror and the strangest legends might just be real. If you like the eerie, the unexplained, and the downright disturbing, hit like and don't forget to subscribe. Some stories are too dark to forget. Our story begins not in Europe, but in the remote steppes of Central Asia around 1320. Deep in the Tian Shan Mountains, something deadly was stirring. Yersinia pestis, the bacterium that causes plague, had been living quietly in colonies of marmots and other rodents for centuries. But then came a perfect storm of factors. Climate change, yes, even in the 14th century, caused droughts that forced infected rodents to seek new homes. They encountered black rats, the ultimate plague carriers, who lived alongside human settlements. The disease spread like wildfire along the Silk Road, that ancient network of trade routes connecting east and west. Merchants, pilgrims, and armies carried more than just goods. They carried death itself. By 1346, the plague had reached the Black Sea port of Kaffa, where one of history's first recorded instances of biological warfare occurred. When Mongol forces besieging the city began dying of plague, they catapulted infected corpses over the walls. The terrified survivors fled by ship, unknowingly carrying the disease to every port they touched. By 1347, those ships had reached Europe, and the continent would never be the same. The medieval world had never seen anything like this. The plague came in 3 horrifying forms, each more terrifying than the last. The most common was bubonic plague. Victims developed enormous painful swellings, called buboes, in their groin, armpits, and neck. These blackened lumps could grow as large as apples and were so agonizing that people couldn't bear to be touched. The skin turned dark and gangrenous, hence the name Black Death. But there was something even worse: pneumonic plague. This attacked the lungs, causing victims to cough up blood and spread the disease through the air. Unlike bubonic plague, which required flea bites, pneumonic plague spread from person to person with every breath. The rarest but most deadly form was septicemic plague, where the bacteria directly infected the bloodstream. Victims could go to bed healthy and be dead by morning, their skin turned completely black. Medieval chroniclers struggled to describe the horror. Giovanni Boccaccio wrote that victims ate lunch with their friends and dinner with their ancestors in paradise. The symptoms were so bizarre that many believed it was supernatural, a punishment from God or the work of demons. As the Black Death swept across Europe from 1347 to 1351, entire communities simply vanished. In some regions, 90% of the population died. Entire villages were abandoned, left to be reclaimed by nature. The social order that had defined medieval life for centuries crumbled overnight. Feudalism, the system where peasants worked land owned by nobles in exchange for protection, began to collapse. Why? Because there weren't enough people left alive to work the fields. The church, the ultimate authority in medieval life, faced a crisis of faith. Priests died faster than other groups because they insisted on giving last rites to the dying. Some bishops lost their entire clergy. People began questioning, if God was all-powerful, why hadn't he protected the faithful? Trade networks that had taken centuries to build disappeared in months. The great fairs of Europe fell silent. Ships sat rotting in harbours because there weren't enough sailors left alive to crew them. But perhaps most shocking of all were the social breakdowns. Giovanni Boccaccio described how brother abandoned brother, uncle abandoned nephew, sister abandoned sister, and oftentimes wife abandoned husband. The normal bonds of society, family, community, religion, simply dissolved under the weight of mass death. Yet in this chaos, something remarkable was happening. The world was being reborn. Medieval people didn't understand germs or bacteria, but they weren't stupid. They quickly realised this disease was contagious and began developing the first public health measures in European history. Venice created the first quarantine system in 1348, forcing ships to wait 40 days before entering port. The word quarantine comes from the Italian quaranta giorni, meaning 40 days. Cities began shutting their gates, essentially creating the first travel bans. Some communities tried more extreme measures. Flagellants roamed the countryside, whipping themselves bloody, believing they could appease God's wrath through self-torture. Others turned to scapegoating, blaming minority groups, particularly Jewish communities, leading to horrific massacres across Europe. The medical profession, such as it was, struggled desperately to understand the disease. They believed in miasma, bad air, and recommended carrying sweet-smelling herbs or flowers. Some doctors wore bizarre bird-like masks filled with aromatics, creating the iconic plague doctor image we still recognise today. But gradually, practical wisdom emerged. People learned to avoid crowds, to isolate the sick, and to burn contaminated materials. Italian city-states began keeping detailed death records, creating the first systematic disease surveillance. The Black Death spawned some of the most persistent myths and bizarre explanations in history. Without understanding of bacteria, people desperately sought explanations for the catastrophe. Many blamed the alignment of planets. Astrologers claimed that a conjunction of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn had corrupted the air. Others believed earthquakes had released poisonous vapours from the Earth's core. The Jewish community faced horrific persecution based on the lie that they had poisoned wells. Despite the fact that Jews died at the same rates as Christians, and despite papal bulls defending them, pogroms swept across Europe. Entire communities were burned alive. Some blamed cats and dogs, leading to mass killing of pets, which actually made the plague worse by allowing rat populations to explode. Others believed the plague was spread by evil looks, or by demonic influence. Perhaps most tragically, some communities turned to human sacrifice, believing they could appease divine wrath. The famous dancing mania saw groups of people dance themselves to death, believing it would save them from plague. But amidst all this supernatural thinking, some began to observe patterns and develop more rational explanations, laying the groundwork for the scientific revolution to come. When the Black Death finally burned itself out around 1351, Europe was unrecognisable. But from this devastation came changes that would reshape civilization forever. Economic revolution. With so many workers dead, the survivors could demand higher wages. The rigid feudal system began cracking as peasants gained unprecedented bargaining power. This led to the Peasants' Revolt in England and similar uprisings across Europe. The age of serfdom was ending. Religious transformation. The church's authority never fully recovered. People had watched priests die despite their supposed divine protection. This crisis of faith would eventually contribute to the Protestant Reformation. New religious movements emerged, many emphasizing personal relationships with God rather than institutional authority. cultural renaissance. Ironically, the massive death toll led to one of history's greatest cultural flowerings. With fewer people competing for resources, survivors inherited wealth and property. This new prosperity, combined with a renewed appreciation for life's fragility, helped fuel the Renaissance. Medical advances. The plague forced Europe to develop its first systematic public health systems. Quarantine procedures, disease surveillance, and medical licensing all emerged from the Black Death experience. Women's liberation. With so many men dead, women entered occupations previously closed to them. They ran businesses, joined guilds, and gained economic independence that would have been unthinkable before the plague. The Black Death even changed art and literature. The famous Dance of Death motif emerged, showing skeletons leading people from all walks of life, kings and peasants, priests and merchants, in a final dance. It was a reminder that death comes for everyone, regardless of status. The Black Death killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people, between 30% and 60% of Europe's population. But its impact went far beyond the death toll. It was a catalyst that transformed medieval Europe into the modern world. The plague broke down old hierarchies and created new opportunities. It sparked innovations in medicine, governance, and economics that we still use today. It showed humanity's incredible resilience, our ability to adapt, learn, and rebuild even after the most devastating catastrophes. Perhaps most importantly, the Black Death taught us that disease doesn't respect borders, social class, or beliefs. Rich and poor, noble and peasant all were equal before the plague. This hard-learned lesson about our shared vulnerability would prove crucial in fighting future pandemics. Today, as we face our own global health challenges, the story of the Black Death reminds us that humanity has survived worse and emerged stronger. The same species that nearly went extinct in the 14th century went on to explore the globe, reach the moon, and decode the very genetics of life itself. The Black Death didn't just change the world, it revealed the incredible resilience of the human spirit. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all. What do you think? Could our modern world survive a plague like the Black Death? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories from history.